2521 Broken Mirror. Mordred remained silent for a while. Eventually, he sighed and glanced up, at the colorful windows of the abandoned church, the Church of Mirage, the demon of imagination. As if mourning the illusion of her creation that he was choosing to forsake. Still looking up, he spoke in a wistful tone. We were 4 when our father handed us to the Dreamspawn. That was soon after America fell, and both Immortal Flame and his daughter perished. Father wasn't quite himself back then. Not that I remember it well. Mordred hesitated for a few moments. I don't think he ever liked us that much, even if I don't know why. Granted, we were indeed a strange child, in more senses than one. We were born with a rare condition that reversed the location of our organs, for example. And we did not learn to speak for a long while, unlike normal children. In fact, it wasn't long after we spoke our first word that we became the Dreamspawn's ward. Morgan smiled darkly. I don't think you should be worried on that account. Our father did not really like anyone that much, an odd child or not. Mordred gave her a furtive glance. In any case, they were both mere masters back then. I spent a couple of years with the Dreamspawn and his followers in the waking world. We moved a lot, exploring all 4 quadrants and South America. We even went on an expedition to Europe, exploring the ruins of old human cities. Then, after the Dreamspawn became transcendent, he took me to the dream realm. I haven't been to the waking world since. Morgan leaned forward a little. What was he like? The Dreamspawn. Mordred lingered with the answer, then shook his head. He was strangely detached, but full of curiosity. Determined, driven, as if searching for something. Everything on Earth seemed to amuse him a little. Looking back, there were too many strange things both about him and about his followers, but I did not know any better. For me, that was simply how things were. I just languished because of his indifference, and longed for his attention. He sighed. In the dream realm, it was often just the 2 of us. The Dreamspawn had a citadel and awakened retainers, but he spent most of his time exploring ancient ruins in the faraway regions of the dream realm, and he took me with him. Me and his most loyal servants, that was, some of them were echoes of nightmare creatures, some of them were echoes of people. A quiet bunch, to say the least. Mordred smiled bitterly. Back then, I convinced myself that he took me with him because he cared about me above everyone else. And he did, just not in the way I believed. I was simply too valuable to be entrusted to anyone. Because there was something he needed from me. He glanced down. In any way, eventually, I turned 12 and faced my first nightmare. That was when I gained my aspect and my flaw, and was shattered into 7 pieces. Mordred inhaled deeply. We were 7 shards of the same person. Each of us inherited some aspects of the original Mordred, but none of us was whole. We were all incomplete, missing parts that we remembered, but did not possess or were capable of any more. His gaze grew distant. Mordred remained silent for a while, then exhaled slowly. Who knows, maybe if things had turned out differently, we could have learned to live that way. We could have learned to rely on each other and make up for what the other ones lacked. We could have acted as a single person who possessed the strength of 7, and the companionship of his missing parts. His expression turned somber. But that was not meant to be. Once we conquered the nightmare, the Dreamspawn took what he needed from us, the blood of War God, and abandoned us callously. He did it easily, and emotionlessly, as if we never mattered to him at all. And so, we were left alone. That was when my other self made his choice. Mordred glanced away with a regretful expression. Instead of learning how to live with the rest of us, he decided to make himself whole as he could be. So, he killed the rest. A dead silence settled in the abandoned church. Morgan stared at Mordred, her face pale. She did not say anything for a long while, and then asked, a hint of a bewildered smile appearing on her face. So, when you were 12, one of you slaughtered the others? Mordred nodded slowly. It sounds like a decision that only a monster can make, but please understand. All of us were limited by what we were still capable of feeling, thinking, and being. And he was not the most compassionate piece of us. He was the strongest, though, and best suited to be a protector. Mordred sighed. Perhaps he did protect us, in a way. In a cruel, terrible way. He killed the other 5 and absorbed them, regaining as many parts of the original Mordred as he could and coming very close to becoming a complete person once again. However, he could not kill me. Not because he was incapable of overpowering me, but simply because one of the parts of the original Mordred I inherited was our death. Mordred closed his eyes for a moment. If I die, we all die, but you must have realized that already. That was why you tried to kill me, wasn't it, Morgan? In any case, that saved me back then. I was the weakest and most vulnerable of us. There are many things I lack, and their absence renders me all but harmless. Which is a death sentence in this world we live in, more or less. So, it is quite ironic that it was I who inherited our death. Almost as ironic as our protector killing us all. He smiled faintly. He must have given you a reason to want to kill him, but please understand. He is still not a complete person, you see. He has regained much of what a human should possess, but not all of it. There is one missing part in particular that lies at the root of what he has become, one small deficiency that influences everything else. Morgan raised an eyebrow. And that is? Mordred sighed. It's regret. While I am capable of feeling it, my other self is not. He is incapable of regretting anything, and like the first domino, that one missing piece causes much of his claim to being a real human to crumble. He glanced at Morgan with a sad smile. But he still wanted to come to Bastion. To find his home again. To belong somewhere again. And he did. He just made sure to hide me somewhere where no one would be able to find me first. So, he hid me under Bastion, in this place. Mordred rubbed his face tiredly. And here we are, 2522, an old story. Here you are, sitting on a plastic chair in a cheap tent bar. Sunny smiled. There were no other customers under the flimsy canopy, and no wonder. With how violent the rain had become and how cold the winds were, most people of Mirage City were huddling at home. The rest were in the process of abandoning the flooded areas, so they had more important things to do than stop at a cheap eatery in the middle of a stormy night. Even the usual drunks were nowhere to be seen. Nevertheless, Sunny was not at all surprised to see the clasp being pulled open as someone came in from the rain. The man glanced around the empty tent, then gave him a pleasant smile. Ah, were you waiting? It breaks my heart a little to see how predictable I have become. Pulling up a plastic chair, Mordred sat opposite Sunny and took off his cap. Drops of water fell from his hair, and he brushed it back, shivering from the cold in his threadbare coat. Sunny pointed to an unopened bottle of soju standing on the table between them. Here, warm yourself up. Mordred obliged, then gave him a curious look. You're not drinking? Sunny gave him a friendly smile. The last time I got drunk, I killed someone. So, his smile widened a little. I thought that if I were to kill you, I'd rather do it sober. You know, to fully enjoy the process. Mordred chuckled and poured himself a glass, then emptied it in a single gulp. So how did you know that I'll come find you again, Sunless? Sunny lingered for a few seconds, then shrugged. It's obvious. We have your other self, after all. You'd want to get him back at all costs, lest Morgan actually finishes him off. He leaned back and sighed. Of course, I did not really know who you would choose to follow, me or Effie. But I had an inkling that it would be me. Mordred studied him for a while, then shrugged. Quite astute. Oh, I saw you visiting the other's assistant earlier. I hope you got what you wanted from him. Sunny nodded. I did. I know who is trying to kill us now. Mordred raised an eyebrow. Really? That was quick. Sunny chuckled. Well, I have an advantage or two when it comes to solving this case. He glanced away with a wistful expression. Actually, pinpointing the assistant as the traitor who kept supplying the mastermind with sensitive information was not that hard. On the day of the first assassination attempt, Mordred changed his plans randomly, but his schedule and route were still leaked. The same happened yesterday. Who had immediate access to that information in both cases, though? Two people, really, the driver and the assistant. Coincidentally, the assistant was the one who drove Mordred yesterday, so he was the only suspect left. Mordred winced. You know, it is quite unpleasant to hear you refer to that man as Mordred. Insulting, even. I disapprove. Sunny stared at him for a few seconds. Well, tough. He leaned back. In any case, the assistant had some information, but not all of the information. Getting it out of him was not too hard, and piecing it all together wasn't too difficult either, not because I am a genius detective but because I know more than people in this city know. He sighed. In this story that the Castellan created, what is the connection between the victims of the Nihilist? How do we, the uninvited guests, fit into it? Who wants to kill Mordred? And most importantly, why now? It is all a proper mess, and finding what ties it all together is not easy at first glance. Oh, but it is all tied together. Just in an unexpected way. Mordred smiled. It seems you really do have a suspect in mind. Sunny nodded. Yes, but, Sorry to disappoint, it is not someone exciting. It is, in fact, the most boring contender, the most obvious one, too, whom everyone would suspect from the very start. It's the chairman of the board, the reflection of your dead uncle, Matic. Mordred seemed a little surprised. It was impossible to tell if his surprise was genuine or if he had known the answer already, though. Uncle dearest, how nefarious. To think that he would conspire against his own nephew. Ah, but it is a story as old as the world itself. A scorned uncle conspiring to oust a noble prince. A simple power grab, quite right. Sunny shook his head. It is Matic, yes. But a power grab? No, the power will simply return to his brother's hands if Mordred dies, after all. So, he had a different motive. He is desperately trying to bury his own sins. He watched as Mordred poured himself more soju with a look of envy, then glanced away. The thread I needed to pull to realize the truth was not whom Matic tried to silence, but the timing of it all. And for that, I simply needed to get the details of what Mordred has been doing for the last few days out of his assistant. So, do you want to know what provoked all this? Was it his policies? The clash of interests over the Valor Group's future? A political agenda, perhaps? Sunny shook his head with a smile of dark amusement. No, it was all because Mordred unexpectedly decided to implement flood prevention measures in the city. Mordred raised an eyebrow. Does Matic want the city to suffer more water damage to inflate the numbers in the repair contracts Valor Construction will receive after the floods are over? Sunny shook his head again. Not quite, but it does have to do with Valor Construction, that is where the skeletons are buried. Or being buried, actually, and would have been flawlessly hidden if not for the fact that Mordred suddenly threw a wrench into these plans. By requesting Valor Construction to mobilize its forces before the floods, he inadvertently gave himself a reason to look at it closely. He sighed. The reason Matic is trying to kill Mordred is because Mordred inevitably noticed a slight discrepancy in the numbers presented by the Valor Construction in their report about the flood prevention efforts, and ordered a full audit to be conducted. Sunny smiled wistfully. It is as they say, I guess. No good deed goes unpunished. Mordred chuckled. Oh, I wouldn't know. I am not known for doing good deeds, personally. He paused for a second and then asked. So what is it that the chairman of the board is so desperate to cover? Sunny shrugged. What else? Embezzlement. He remained silent for a while, and then glanced north. It's not the fact of the embezzlement that is important, though, it's what he embezzled the funds from. The last major project of Valor Construction, the restoration of the Northern Dam. Sunny sighed, which would not have been a problem, if not for these abnormally heavy rains. Because of them, the Northern Dam is not going to hold. He glanced at Mordred with a neutral expression. Mirage City is going to drown. 2523 Art imitates life. Sunny took the soju bottle and poured Mordred a glass. Of course, he made sure to hold it with one hand while doing so, since holding it with both would have been too polite. Pushing the glass toward the Prince of Nothing, he leaned back and pursed his lips. There was no nihilist originally. It was just Mirage City hunting down the reflections of your vessels to erase an anomaly. Things have changed after the rest of us arrived, and now, these murders have an actual explanation. Funnily enough, there is still no nihilist anywhere out there. The terrifying serial killer terrorizing the entire city does not exist. Sunny shook his head with a resentful expression. He is just a cover story Matic has concocted to direct everyone's attention away from the truth. And the truth is that these people were killed by professionals he had hired to silence them, to tie up loose ends. Just like he hired enforcers to kill his nephew and us. The missing eyes are just a red herring, whatever the hell a herring is, meant to distract the public. He sighed. If you study the backgrounds of the victims, all of them have a connection to the Valor Group. The owner of a building company handling several contracts with Valor Construction, an archivist from an enterprise that provided outsourcing services to the Valor Group, a security guard who was recently reassigned from the renovation site, and so on. Each of them can be traced to Valor Construction and the Northern Dam contract it received from the city. Sunny smiled faintly. So is Mordred. So are GE2 detectives who were sniffing around both him and the supposed serial killer victims. So is Morgan, who must have known something about her uncle's shady dealings, and her psychiatrist. After all, who knows what Morgan let slip in her lengthy therapy sessions with Saint, confined in a mental asylum and pumped full of drugs. Mordred glanced at him with interest. That Saint, what an interesting person. I did not know that there was another human with the affinity to nothing somewhere out there. Ah, I would not mind getting to know her better, if fortune allows. Sunny stared at his smile for a few seconds, then reached forward and pushed his glass over without changing expression. Not paying the spilled soju any attention, he said in an even tone. Anyway, all of the people Matic killed or tried to kill can be traced to the Northern Dam renovation project. Of course, that alone does not mean anything, all of them can be traced to a great number of things. Chocolate milk, for example. Or the police department, or Mordred himself. Human lives are like that. All of us share countless connections, and anyone can be tied to anything in this enormous web. Unless some misguided fool went and met a nasty bird that severed all these connections. Then, a person would become untraceable, and easily lost. Sunny smiled. Pinpointing a particular connection between all these threads as the reason for what is happening is nearly impossible in a short amount of time, let alone proving it. But I have the advantage of foreknowledge. He moved his chair a little back to prevent the spilled soju from dripping on him. Mirage City is not exactly Bastion, but it is clearly inspired by it. There is the Mirror Lake in the castle, there is also Rivergate, even if it is situated a bit closer to the city. The Northern Dam does not exist in Bastion, though, in the false Bastion, at least. It does exist in true Bastion, turned to ruin. There is another difference between the two, as well, the drowned city at the bottom of the lake. He let out a wistful sigh. The Northern Dam was destroyed in true Bastion, and the resulting flood destroyed the city. Art imitates life. The story the Castellan seems to be telling draws inspiration from the ancient past, as well. After all, the Castellan is a reflection that has dwelled in the great mirror from before the moon above true Bastion was shattered. It witnessed the destruction of the dam and the fall of the city below personally. Sunny shrugged. So, that was how I was able to piece together the clues and realize what was going on. Matic has embezzled the funds from the renovation project for whatever reason, possibly he needed to create a slush fund, bribe his way into a political career, or buy himself a new yacht. In any case, the work Valor Construction performed on the dam was shoddy at best, perhaps even harmful. Now, the entire city is in jeopardy, and he is silencing everyone who can expose his guilt. Mordred chuckled. Excellent detective work. Sunless, no, truly, 1 AM impressed. You did not exactly have a lot of time to investigate the case, and half of it has been spent fighting hired killers and surviving lethal car crashes. How exciting. It is almost like the old detective stories I used to read as a kid. Sunny was a little disturbed by that statement, reminded that Mordred too had been a human once. He grimaced. Thank you. Being a detective is quite a new experience for me, but I know a thing or two about crime. I have not always been a law-abiding citizen, after all, so, know how criminals think. He took a deep breath, then glanced at Mordred. So, now we simply have to take Matic off the board. Once he is gone, the Castellan will have to reveal itself, to make one last attempt to prevent its illusion from crumbling. Mordred smiled amicably. That won't be easy. Uncle Matic must have hidden himself in some impregnable fortress by now, surrounded by an army of hired thugs. Getting to him will be difficult, let alone arresting him, so, what is your plan? Sunny smiled, too. Why, it's very simple. He pointed to Mordred. Lamb planning to use you as bait. 2524 The wise and benevolent Prince Mordred. Mordred laughed. Me? Goodness gracious. I don't even officially exist in this reality. How are you going to make me into bait? Sunny grinned. How else? By dressing you in a fancy suit and giving you some hair gel, naturally. You will take the place of your nicer self and draw Matic out. Naturally, your life will be in grave danger when you do, but that is a risk I am quite willing to take. He let out a dreamy sigh. Actually, I am looking forward to it. Mordred picked up his overturned glass and emptied the rest of the bottle into it. Taking a sip, he gave Sunny an amused look. But what's in it for me? Sunny shrugged. That is negotiable, but, look at yourself. You can put on a brave face, but it is obvious that your time here in the Palace of Imaginations has not been pleasant. I don't think I ever saw you in such a sorry state. Staying alive while the entire Mirage City is hunting you has not been easy, has it? So are you really in a position to make demands? Mordred laughed. He savored his drink, then gave Sunny a curious glance. Have you really not entered the Great Mirror to kill me? Sunny grimaced, uncomfortable with having to answer that question. It threatened to reveal too much of his secrets to Mordred, which was never a good thing. I did not even know that you could be killed outside a soul duel before meeting your better half. So, no, Mordred considered something for a few moments. But now that you know, you probably would not mind killing me. Isn't that the case? Damnation. Sunny let out a frustrated sigh. Sure, there are too many reasons to kill you, and too few to keep you alive. Please don't take offense, actually, please do. I meant it as an insult. Mordred chuckled and finished his drink in one gulp. Well, you are wrong. The reasons to keep me alive might be few, but they outweigh the myriad reasons to be rid of me that you and Changing Star seem to have. In fact, forget about why you came here. Why do you think I came here, Sunless? Sunny frowned. Wasn't it to stop Morgan from carving your other self's heart out? Mordred slowly shook his head. That was a reason, but not the reason. In truth, I would have come here even if Morgan had not learned about his existence. He glanced Sunny right in the eye and smiled. Gods, you really have no idea, do you? How troubling. Sunny's frown deepened. I do have an idea. In fact, I have several ideas, and the more you keep talking in circles, the more ideas I get. Mordred sighed and glanced away. In a rare moment of sincerity, his mask of decorum slipped, revealing a hint of some somber emotion, as well as unease. Then, he put his polite smile back on. Allow me to enlighten you, then. I've been quite heartbroken to learn that you managed to kill my father before I could, Sunless. So heartbroken, in fact, that I was considering doing something unwise to get back at you. Something childish and vindictive, like devastating the entire sword domain or turning NQSC into a graveyard before slowly pulling you limb from limb. While Sunny's expression turned dark, his smile widened a little. Ah, but I swiftly regained my senses. Sure, it pained me a great deal to have my vengeance stolen from me, but I am nothing if not a pragmatist. The goal I chose to make the purpose of my existence was gone. So, like the wise and benevolent man that I am, I decided to look to the future instead of dwelling on the past. Sunny smiled darkly. Oh, you sure it wasn't because pulling a sovereign limb from limb posed a bit of a problem to your benevolent self? Mordred laughed. Ah, indeed. Despite my anger, the prospect of making two new supremes my sworn enemies did not seem too enticing. Sunny studied him for a while. So, what was the future you envisioned for yourself? Did you find a new goal? Mordred shrugged. It is too soon to speak about new goals. I have to ensure my safety first. My actions, you see, are a matter of necessity at the moment, not of choice. Sunny scowled. What the hell do you mean? What necessity? Mordred chuckled. His laughter did not sound very joyous, though. Think about it. I hid my flaw, my one weakness, in this secretive place. Not even my father knew about his existence or about the Palace of Imagination. You learned about my flaw from Morgan, while Morgan learned it from the legacy left behind by Qi Song. But how did Qi Song know about it, not to mention where to find it? Sunny glanced at him somberly. I don't know. I assumed it was through some form of divination, perhaps Death Sinji had lent a hand. Mordred shook his head. No, it wasn't divination. Someone simply told her about it. Someone who knows more about me than anyone else, and with whom she could bargain to keep my father in check. Sunny tensed. The person Mordred was hinting at could be only one man. You mean, the third sovereign? Mordred smiled sharply. Indeed, the Dreamspawn knows my weakness very well. He knows a great deal of things. In fact, I am not sure if there is anything he does not know. His voice sounded a bit peculiar. If Sunny did not know Mordred better, he would have believed that the bastard was afraid. But, naturally, that was impossible. So what does it have to do with you coming to the Palace of Imagination? Mordred shrugged. It's easy. My flaw has been safe here until now, but not anymore. He lingered for a few seconds, and then added with a chilling smile. Because the Dreamspawn is coming. And when he does, no one in the world, any world, will be safe anymore. 2525 The Dreamspawn cometh. A heavy silence settled in the tent bar, broken only by the muted rustle of the rain outside. The mention of the nebulous sovereign, Astarion, caused the chill of the night to feel colder, and the darkness in the corners of the bar to seem darker, even though both Sunny and Mordred had avoided mentioning his name. After all, those who knew of his existence all believed that the Dreamspawn could hear his name being spoken aloud, no matter where and when it was spoken. Even knowing about him could attract his attention. Sunny smiled crookedly. The Dreamspawn, oh my, what a scarecrow. He leaned back, relaxing on his plastic chair, and shrugged. I've been hearing scary stories about this man for decades now. But is he really that frightening? From what I could tell, his only claim to glory was joining your father in betraying Broken Sword. Even then, they just barely managed to kill him. Mordred shook his head. I think you misunderstand something, Sunless. It wasn't that the Dreamspawn joined my father, my dear father only dared to turn on Broken Sword because he had struck a deal with the Dreamspawn. Which, albeit it pains me to admit, is not at all an indication of my father's weakness, rather, Broken Sword was that much of a monster. He smiled pleasantly. I should know. After all, I was the price my father paid to ensure the Dreamspawn's support. And because of that, Broken Sword ended up dead despite all his dire power. He shrugged. You are quite a treacherous person yourself, Sunless, so you should know that. The means one uses to achieve victory do not matter too much. The only thing that matters is who is left standing at the end of the battle. That is the only true measure of power. The Dreamspawn might have used cunning and treachery to kill Broken Sword, but he still killed him. Which means that, in the end, he was a deadlier monster. Sunny could not argue that point. Still, he felt reluctant to agree. Sure, cunning and deviousness are a part of one's power. But what of it? How diabolical that guy could have been if he ended up being outplayed and trapped on the moon by his allies. He smirked. Gods, who's to say that he is still alive, even? That mysterious boogeyman everyone seems to be terrified of might have died years ago. There is a Category 6 gate on the moon, after all, or maybe something even more unfathomable. Which means that there is an unholy horror guarding that gate. Even if the nature of the waking world is suppressing its powers, I find it hard to believe that your Dreamspawn has survived decades in the domain of an unholy nightmare creature. Mordred smiled faintly. Oh, he's alive. Of that, I have no doubt. He glanced at Sunny with a peculiar darkness hiding in his gaze. And the two of you and your own Dreamspawn, have made a deadly mistake. I cannot in good conscience blame you, though, in truth, his return became inevitable the moment the King of Swords and the Queen of Worms fell. Do you think that he is staying on the moon of his own free will? No, naturally not. He could have escaped it a long time ago, if not for the fact that they were suppressing him all this time, and preventing his insidious influence from spreading back to Earth. Mordred sighed. However, the only two people who could shield the world from him are gone now. Changing Star, you, and even me, we simply do not know enough about the Dreamspawn and his powers to take their place in time. We do not have the benefit of having thoroughly prepared to contain him, either. So, he is coming. In fact, I am willing to bet that his influence has already began spreading both across the waking world and the dream realm. Sunny raised an eyebrow. Who says that we haven't prepared? He sighed and glanced away. Naturally, we are no fools. We suspected that a confrontation with the Third Sovereign was inevitable, too, so, we have been looking for signs of his return ourselves. Naturally, it has not been easy due to the fact that merely knowing about him puts our agents in danger, but we have been looking. That was one of the purposes, perhaps the main purpose, of the Shadow Clan. Sunny had created a vast information network that spanned both worlds, serving as his eyes and ears, precisely because he wanted to know about Astarion showing up as soon as possible. The members of the Shadow Clan did not know what they were looking for themselves, for safety reasons, but that did not prevent them from reporting all strange and suspicious things they had noticed to Sunny, as well as serving as conduits of his shadow sense. In fact, he was going to receive the next report soon, now that the busy days of the winter solstice were behind them. Mordred glanced at him with an amused smile. Then you have not been looking well enough. Sunny remained silent for a while, then sighed. The Dreamspawn, what is he like? Mordred studied him for a long while, then took a deep breath and let out a short laugh. Oh, him. Well, if I were to describe him succinctly, I'd say that he is a mirror image of your changing star. A being very much like her, but also the exact opposite of her in what she stands for, like the dark side of a radiant sun. Or possibly he is what Changing Star was supposed to be, taken to the logical conclusion. Sunny scowled, surprised and unjived by that answer. What do you mean? Mordred gave him a concerned look. You know what a Dreamspawn is, don't you? A being born of both worlds, belonging to neither. Someone walking on the edge between a human and an abomination. Sunny's scowl deepened. That was one way to interpret it. Nephis was no abomination, but in some sense, she did share a degree of kinship with them. That was the reason why she could absorb a portion of the soul fragments of the abominations who died to her flames, just like Awakened who killed other Awakened could. What of it? Mordred smiled darkly. Well, it seems to me that both of them have taken the burden of being a Dreamspawn to an extreme end. Changing Star denied the nightmare part of her so thoroughly as to become the very symbol of humanity. Completely incorruptible, he glanced at Sunny and added in a lower tone. That man, however, the first and original Dreamspawn, did the opposite. He doesn't care about being human at all. In fact, I don't think he even considers himself a human. Instead, he has accepted the creature part of him with open arms, and among all creatures, he is the most frightening one of all. He is the kind of creature who walks around wearing a human face. Sunny shivered. I think, I am starting to understand how Mordred ended up being who he is. 2526 Nightmare Spawn. Sunny glanced at Mordred in displeasure. Now, even he was starting to feel a little uneasy at the mention of Astarion. He was also a little stunned. The idea of a human who considered himself a spawn of Nightmare had never crossed his mind. Even more disturbing was the fact that Astarion had an actual claim to such a title. Mordred chuckled. It is not that surprising if you think about it. What is a human, after all? There are some common traits we all share, like having 2 hands and 2 feet, being featherless bipeds. However, does a saint cease to be a human when they assume their transcendent form? Hardly. In truth, we also share more profound things. Our way of thinking, culture, values, our birthplace. He sighed. But that man was born in a different world, and raised by people who had quite a peculiar culture and values. More than that, he was unique even among them, the first of his kind. The first human child born in the dream realm, the first dreamspawn. He only encountered human civilization after becoming awakened. So, it's not that hard to imagine that he would consider himself a stranger to our merry band. Oh, and I am using "our" figuratively. In truth, I feel somewhat like a stranger to mankind myself. Sunny offered him a half-hearted smile. So what you are telling me is that while Nephis is a dream spawn, that man is better described as a nightmare spawn. Mordred shrugged. A dream spawn, a nightmare spawn, is there really a difference? In the world we live in, the two are one and the same. Sunny pursed his lips. There is a difference. Names have a power, you know. Regardless, I am more interested in something else. That man, whatever we call him, is he actually corrupted? Mordred hesitated for a while. I am not quite sure. These dream spawns are all paradoxical creatures, you know. I do not think that he is truly corrupted. I believe that he is still walking the path of ascension. However, who can tell? He might be a human who is walking the path of corruption, or a corrupted man who is walking the path of ascension. Or maybe there is no difference between the two for him at all. He grinned. If I knew that much about the dreamspawn, I wouldn't be here, desperately trying to prepare for his return. I can tell you one thing, though. Mordred glanced at Sunny with a smile. Of all the people in both worlds, I am the one who knows the most about him. So, coming back to the question that provoked this unpleasant conversation, the reason neither you nor Changing Star can afford to kill me is that I am your best ally in the fight against the dreamspawn. That soured Sunny's mood quite a lot. He was feverishly digesting the new information about Astarion. Sunny had known that the third sovereign would become a problem sooner or later. However, after hearing Mordred out, he was inclined to believe the bastard. The problem would arrive sooner rather than later. And the danger posed by Astarion was perhaps even greater than Sunny, Nephis, and Cassie had anticipated. Worse of all, no matter how much Sunny was revolted by the idea, he could not deny Mordred's last statement. They could not afford to exterminate their best source of information about Astarion, at least not just yet. Killing Mordred would be a mistake, despite how much of a loose cannon he was in all the terrible crimes he had committed. They could make him answer for those after Astarion had been dealt with, regardless. On top of that, Sunny was still not entirely comfortable with the idea of killing the other Mordred in cold blood just to get rid of this one. That guy was innocent, having done nothing wrong, nothing to justify an execution, anyway. Sunny had killed plenty of people in his life, and was not above doing what had to be done in order to achieve his goals. But he was not entirely callous, either, so, he felt undecided on what to do with the other Mordred. And that, without a doubt, was another fact Mordred was counting on. That slippery bastard. Sunny glanced at the Prince of Nothing somberly. I might, just might, consider keeping you alive. However, you should think about giving me a taste of what you are offering, to help me make the decision. What powers does Astarion possess? What is his aspect? What is his flaw? Why is he searching for divine lineages? And so on. Mordred laughed. So many questions. He lingered for a while, then spoke in a distant tone, as if musing aloud. Let's not mention his ability to manipulate and compel living beings, as well as to know things that are not supposed to be known. That is his aspect, at least I suspect that it is, but not his nature. His nature, meanwhile, Mordred frowned faintly. The Dreamspawn bears the lineage of the most elusive of the gods, Heart God, the god of souls, as well as emotions, memory, growth, and hunger. So, he wields an eerie power to consume and assimilate things. That is what makes him a monster. He is a chimera. Sunny blinked a few times. Wait, you don't mean that? Mordred nodded. Yes, it is not supposed to be possible, just like the existence of beings who are both divine and profane is not supposed to be possible, but the Dreamspawn is capable of bearing several lineages at the same time. He inherited the lineage of Heart God from his parents, he assimilated the lineage of War God from my blood. He received the lineage of Beast God from Ki Song, and plundered the lineage of Storm God from Nightwalker. He chuckled. He kept Neffys of Immortal Flame alive because he needed her to grow up and awaken to steal the lineage of Sun God. And he has waited for a long, long time for the lineage of Shadow God to finally reveal itself. For you to reveal yourself. So, now that all he seeks is within reach, he will inevitably come for the two of you, to finish his collection and absorb all 6 divine lineages. What for? That, I do not know. Mordred glanced at Sunny and raised an eyebrow. How's that for a taste? Ah, am I not a generous and benevolent person? Look, I turned a new leaf. That is the second time I shared valuable information with you for free. Sunny remained silent for a long while. The good thing is that my incarnations can sense what is happening in Mirage City. So, they'll be relaying this information to Neffys and Cassie immediately. After a while, he sighed. Fine, let's strike a deal, you and I. What do you want in exchange for acting as bait to lure the Castellan out, and helping us deal with the Dreamspawn in the future? Mordred shrugged. It is as I said. I want safety, ensure the survival of my pathetic other self, put him in a place more secure than the Palace of Imagination. The safest place in both worlds, settle him on the Ivory Island, and guard him as fervently as you guard each other, both from the Dreamspawn and from Morgan. Actually, from anything that can harm him even a little bit. Sunny tilted his head a little. You want us, Neffys, Cassie, and me, to become roommates with your other self. That is your price. Mordred smiled pleasantly. Quite aptly put. Yes, at least until the Dreamspawn is dealt with. I know, cohabitating with that worm is an unpleasant prospect, but please bear with him for a while. Sunny frowned. He wasn't sure that Mordred was being sincere. In fact, he was quite certain that the bastard was deceiving him, somehow. But there was one thing Sunny knew for sure. It was that Mordred absolutely detested Astarion. A long time ago, the Prince of Nothing had shared his intentions with him. He had wanted revenge against the Dreamspawn almost as much as he wanted to avenge himself on Valor. That made his motives at least a little bit believable. In fact, he is giving us a hostage. What would that lunatic be able to do if his very death was in their hands? Nothing. Sunny glanced at Mordred somberly for a long while, then sighed. It's a deal. 2,527 cent of rain. Some time prior, Effie returned home, the home of her counterpart, which felt both familiar and strange. It was different from her own family home in Bastion, but shared the same feeling of coziness with it. The nature of life in Mirage City was vastly different from the real world, of course, but Effie vaguely remembered how her counterpart had lived, which was why she did not feel particularly alien to this fantastical place. If anything, she felt a little bit too at home here. The people quietly following her in the shadows were troublesome. It was the people inside, however, who were the problem. Opening the door, Effie took off her coat and shook off the drops of water from her hair. By the time she was done with that, the sound of little feet drumming excitedly on the floor was already drawing near. Mommy. She put on a smile. Her children, her counterpart's children, were upon her a moment later. She crouched to hug them, burying her face in their soft hair. Mommy's home. Mama. It was raining a lot, Mama. The boy was a little older, while the little girl was still a toddler. He was boisterous, while she was shy. Both of them were full of the irresistible, innocent sweetness that only children possessed. Neither of them was real. Effie kept reminding herself of that fact, but it was of no use. Cold rationality was powerless in the face of blazing emotions, and it was especially powerless in the face of those fundamental feelings that lay at the foundation of human nature. Like the affection a mother felt for her children. Despite ONLU knowing them for a few days, she did not want to let these kids go. She couldn't. Hey, you rascals. Your mom had a very long day. Give me a minute to catch my breath. The kids reluctantly let go of her and took a couple of steps back. The girl glanced up at her with wide eyes, which suddenly started to water for no good reason. Uh-oh, Mama. Did you get an ouchie? Effie glanced down at herself. She had been in pretty bad shape after the car crash, but most of her bruises and contusions were out of view. There were a few scrapes on her arms and face, though, covered by adhesive bandage. She smiled and patted her daughter's head. Yes, but just a tiny one. Then, she winked at the little girl. Mama is too awesome to get really hurt, Pumpkin. The boy clenched his fists. Our mom is the awesomest mom in the world. Of course she won't get hurt. Effie laughed. All right, settle down. Let's prepare you for bed. The kids protested in unison. No, I want ice cream first. I want to watch cartoons. She let out a theatrical sigh. No ice cream before bed. Where did this idea even come from? Cartoons are negotiable, though. Soon enough, Effie found herself on the sofa with two soft bodies pressed against her, hugging the kids gently as they watched a colorful cartoon with enthralled expressions. Look, look, it's Tailai. Go get them, Tailai. On the screen, a pair of precocious kids somehow got themselves into trouble with a band of clumsy bandits while trying to obtain ice cream from a magical ice cream stand. At the last moment, the owner of the stand, a pink dragon named Tailai, revealed herself to save the day. She dealt with the bandits, huffed and puffed until they ran away to surrender themselves to the police, and then treated the kids to waffle cones full of delicious ice cream. Ah, I want ice cream too. Tailai is the best. The name of this popular cartoon was, apparently, Talitha's Ice Cream. The titular Talitha, strangely enough, resembled a young awakened girl Effie had met in Bastion once or twice, one of the Shadow Clan members operating there in secret. Considering that everyone in Mirage City was based on reflections from outside the Great Mirror, that wasn't too peculiar. Effie did not know why that girl's reflection turned out to be a pink dragon, though. That was a mystery. Ah, I want ice cream, too. She smiled and hugged her kids tighter. Then, her expression froze. What am I doing? These children were not hers. But even if they were, tonight, she was going to say goodbye to them. Forever. Effie was going to leave and never return. She was going to face the Castellan and challenge it for control of the Palace of Imagination. If she lost, she would die. Detective Athena of the Mirage City Police Department would die, too, leaving these sweet kids to grow up without a mother. If she won, Mirage City would very likely cease to exist, and these innocent children would cease to exist with it. In any case, she would never see them again. There was suddenly a dull ache in Effie's chest. She remained motionless for a while, and then let out a quiet sigh. They're not real. Soon enough, the cartoon was over. She prepared the pair of children for bed, and then lingered in their room, looking at them quietly. Mom, Dad said that you won't have to go to work for a while. Let's go to the zoo tomorrow. Let's go to the park. Let's go to the movies. Effie smiled gently. That sounds nice. The boy seemed way too excited to fall asleep anytime soon. Let's go to the lake. Let's go to the toy store. Ooh, they are opening the castle soon, let's go to the castle. Effie's smile dimmed a little. That sounds nice, too. Sometime later, she turned off the lamps and put on the night light for the children. Then, Effie made to leave. But at the last moment, a tiny hand caught her sleeve. Glancing down, she saw the little girl looking at her with pitiful eyes. Mama, don't go. Effie let out a small sigh. Kneeling in front of the girl's bed, she tucked her in and said softly. Mama has to go, Pumpkin. Sleep tight, when you open your eyes. She paused and remained silent for a while. Then, she forced out a smile. Daddy will make you a delicious breakfast. He will take you to the zoo, to the park, and to the movies. He will even buy you ice cream. The girl's eyes glistened. What about you, Mama? Will Daddy buy ice cream for you, too? Effie chuckled. Why, of course. How can I leave them? She glanced at the little girl intently, as if wanting to etch her lovely image into her memory. If someone asked Effie to describe what she felt at that moment, she would not have been able to. But it was then that she finally understood what she was missing, what stood in her way on the path of ascension. Kai's greatest obstacle had been his lack of confidence. But Effie was different. What held her back the most was her inability to let go. The very reason she wanted to become stronger was to protect the things she cherished. But if she wanted to protect them, she had to let go. She had to learn how to leave them behind. How twisted. Patting the little girl on the head, Effie leaned down and whispered. Mommy loves you very much. She was saying it for Detective Athena, who could not say it herself, and for her own sake, as well. Deep at night, when the entire house slept soundly, Effie crept to the window and opened it without making a sound. Throwing one last look back, she closed her eyes for a second and inhaled the smells of the strange, cozy home. Then, her expression hardened. She smiled bitterly and turned away. A moment later, she was gone, leaving behind only the scent of rain. 2528 Last fragments. It was at the crack of dawn that Sunny finally reached the abandoned church. The city was still enveloped in deep darkness, though, due to the heavy storm clouds obscuring the sky. The torrential rain continued to pour down. The flooding in various parts of the city was only growing worse, the roads were a mess, and the silence of the dying night was kept at bay by the blaring of car horns. Looking at the many PTVs stuck in the slowly rising water, Sunny could not help but expect them to start blowing up in a devastating chain reaction. However, none of them did. Despite the strange nature of their engines and fuel, the ancient vehicles were not at all as prone to exploding as he had expected. Parking his newly acquired PTV in front of the church, Sunny climbed out and walked in. Effie arrived first. It seemed, both of them had long escaped the surveillance team sent to spy on them, but Sunny ran a few errands before returning to their temporary lair. "Hey, partner," Effie met him with a wave. Her usually bright and boisterous smile seemed faint and subdued today, and there was a hint of wistful melancholy in her eyes. Sunny frowned slightly and stopped near her. "Are you all right?" Effie chuckled. "Me? Oh, well, yes. Sure I am. When have I ever not been all right?" He studied her for a few moments, knowing that she was not telling the truth. But he also knew that she did not want to talk about what was bothering her. At least not with him, who was still mostly a stranger. So, Sunny simply respected her wishes, even if it hurt. He smiled derisively. "You're just bummed out because you'll never get the chance to gobble up an entire box of those donut thingies, right?" Effie's smile widened, turning at least a little bit sincere. "Damn, you know me so well. I haven't even thought about that." He scoffed, then walked past her. The other Mordred was napping on one of the benches. Morgan was keeping an eye on him from behind the altar. Saint was sitting apart from everyone, staring into the distance. Sunny contemplated for a few moments, then walked over to Morgan first. She briefly informed him about what they had learned from the other Mordred while he explained to her who was behind the attempts on their lives. The knowledge of what Mordred's flaw actually was rendered Sunny speechless for a while, but eventually, he gave Morgan a slow nod. Strangely enough, it made sense for Mordred to be a broken mirror of himself, each shard reflecting the visage of the original person from a different angle. Sunny looked at Morgan, then asked, "So, this version of your brother, is he really as nice as he seems? Is he actually a sane person?" She looked in the direction where the other Mordred slept and remained silent for a long while. Her usually cold expression seemed troubled, somehow. Eventually, Morgan shook her head slightly and sighed. "He is indeed just what he seems, nice, decent, compassionate. But a sane person? No, he is not sane. In fact, I am not even sure that he can be called a person. If anything, I'd say that he is even more damaged than the one we know." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "More crazy than that psychopath?" "How so?" Morgan smiled faintly. "The Mordred from the real world cannot feel regret, which twisted him into the monster we know today. But this one cannot feel other things: anger, resentment, hatred, contempt, and much more. Oddly enough, or perhaps quite predictably, that makes him much less of a complete person than the other one is. He is a cripple." She paused for a moment. "He has no negative feelings toward the one who imprisoned him in this illusion whatsoever, despite all the suffering he endured here. He might feel sad about the death of his driver, who had served his family for decades, but he is incapable of resenting the person who killed him. And if we tell him that the one who wants to kill him is his own uncle, he would not be able to feel hurt by that betrayal, not really. It is as if his soul was neutered." Morgan shook her head with a wistful expression. "So, yes, he is nice. He is smart, affectionate, and pleasant. But he is not mentally sound. Not at all. I guess, he is what remains of a person when their very being gets shattered into pieces." She looked at Sunny and smiled darkly. "And if you ask me, crazy as it may sound, I would have preferred to be the murderous Ani instead of a harmless one." Sunny stared back at her silently. What a surprise. So would I. A person would probably become a monster if they were not capable of feeling regret, but what would they become if they were incapable of feeling anger? That wasn't something he ever wanted to experience, or could allow himself to lose. Sunny had gotten this far due to various reasons, but for a long stretch of it all, he had only survived out of spite. If his ability to feel the darker shades of human emotions was taken away from him, he would not have lived for long. He would not have been able to truly experience the brighter, stunning feelings humans felt, either. It is a bit sad. No matter how sad it was, though, there was a different aspect of Mordred's flaw to consider. He looked quietly at the sleeping CEO of the Valor Group. According to Morgan, when one fragment of Mordred killed another, the destroyed fragment was absorbed. That was what the Mordred they knew had done to 5 of his mirror versions. And the other Mordred, despite all of it, was indeed harmless. That presented a potential way to remove the danger Mordred posed without robbing humanity of one of its most fearsome scions. The Prince of Nothing could not kill his other self, because that last piece of him he had not absorbed yet contained his death. But what would happen if the other Mordred killed the Prince of Nothing? Then, they would become an actual person. A complete individual capable of feeling everything that a human being was supposed to feel, and therefore not at all as unhinged as the Prince of Nothing was. And that would give Sunny and Neffys a chance to recruit an ally who was both immensely powerful and potentially reliable, which was an incredible boon, especially considering the looming threat of Astarion. It is worth considering, is it not? Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. Whether it was or wasn't worth it did not matter, because it was hardly possible, precisely because of what the other Mordred was. He was indeed overly nice, kind, and compassionate, which meant that he would never kill his other self, no matter what the Prince of Nothing had done in the past. One could not kill the other without destroying himself, while the other could not kill anyone, really, let alone his last mirror sibling. Therefore, Mordred was destined to remain fragmented forever. A flaw is a flaw, how gruesomely apartment. Sunny sighed, then looked at Morgan and said in a neutral tone. In any case, go wake him up. We should start preparing to depart, so, get ready. Everything will be decided today. When Morgan walked past him, Sunny inhaled deeply and looked at Saint. Now, for the hardest part. He had to convince Drive Saint to lend them a hand in the fight against the Castellan, somehow. 2529 carved in stone. Dr. Saint. Sunny had to repeat her name twice before she turned and regarded him with a distant, aloof gaze. He hesitated for a few seconds, then sat down next to her. I guess I have some good news and some bad news for you. Saint simply watched him without saying anything. He could not read anything from her expression, either, so, despite the fact that she looked quite like a human at the moment, he suddenly felt like he was talking to his familiar shadow. That comforted him a little. The good news is that I found out who is trying to kill us. The bad news is that arresting him, let alone prosecuting him, will pose a problem. Half of the city is in his pocket, after all. And we don't have time to do it by the book, either. She raised her eyebrows slightly, prompting Sunny to smile. You're right, I do not have the authority to arrest anyone anymore, anyway. But you know what my counterpart, the devil detective, would say. We have to try regardless. That person has committed too many crimes to walk free. The victims of the nihilist and all the other people he hurt or ruined demand justice. Me personally, though, I do not care about justice too much. He inhaled deeply. However, I have my own reasons to want to deal with the mastermind behind all these deaths. Doing so will be my ticket home, and yours, too. Among other things. So, I want to ask a favor from you. That guy will not go down without a fight. Please, help me bring him down. I need you. Sunny chuckled. Like always. It strikes me that I would not be alive if not for your silent presence over all these years. In fact, I would have died 10 times over. Hell, you even taught me how to properly wield a sword, and as a sign of gratitude, I dragged you on a series of increasingly macabre adventures through the depths of increasingly dreadful hells. Sorry, Saint, you got a very troublesome, very needy liege. He remained silent for a while, looking down, then added. In any case, I doubt that we will have a conversation like this after escaping the Palace of Imagination. So, using this chance, I just wanted to say, thank you, Saint. For everything. Even if I somehow managed to find a way to survive without you, it would not have been half as fun. She studied him for a long while without saying anything, then looked away. After a long stretch of silence, Saint let out a quiet sigh and asked. So, in that supposedly real world, did you mention that I serve you? I am a servant, Sunny coughed. Well, no, not exactly. I am the Lord of Shadows, and you are one of my Shishay Daos, the very first shadow I created, actually. It is the nature of a shadow to be cast by someone, and in your case, I guess you are cast by me. You are not a servant, though. More of a champion, a companion, and the general of my legion. He looked at the beautiful windows of the church and smiled. We met on the streets of the Dark City, where you killed a couple of abominations of a higher rank and class than you, all alone. Then, we traveled across the deadly reaches of the Forgotten Shore together, besieged the Crimson Spire, explored the Chained Isles and endured the crushing side by side, survived the madness of the Kingdom of Hope, fought a losing war in Antarctica and defended Falcon Scott until the bitter end, ventured into the harrowing darkness of the tomb of Ariel and sailed the great river of time, crossed the hollow mountains and reached the end of the world, fought a bloody war against the sovereigns on the corpse of a dead god. Sunny chuckled. Goodness gracious. Now that I list all these things aloud, it sounds like quite an intense decade. Saint shifted slightly, then raised her hand. A torrent of inky darkness escaped from beneath her skin, swirling around her wrist before forming into a black blade for a moment. I don't recall. Sunny sighed. He still did not know why Saint seemed to be incapable of remembering who she was. It was funny, but despite being the Lord of Shadows, he did not know a lot about the nature of his shadows. He did not really know how they thought, how they felt, what motivated them, what their goals and desires were, or if they even had any. He had only ever caught small glimpses of how they existed while augmenting them. Sunny knew, for example, that Saint vaguely remembered her original self. However, those memories were distant and obscure, like a half-forgotten dream. Perhaps that was a mercy. After all, what would become of Saint if she could remember her previous life? That life contained thousands of years of corruption, after all. Remembering it would not only be a torment, but could very well drive her insane, or worse still, infect her with the seeds of nightmare all over again. Maybe that was why she could not remember herself here, in Mirage City. Or maybe it was because Saint was quite like Mordred, a semblance of a person, but not really a complete being. Even her name was not really a name, but simply what her people had been called. Nameless and cast by a fateless master, how could she remember her true self? Ures had once told Sunny that his shadows could be completed, somehow, but if there was a way, Sunny had not found it yet. He rubbed his face. Still, even if you don't remember, I'll do it. He froze, then looked at Saint with wide eyes. Excuse me. She turned to him with the usual impassive expression. I'll help you bring down the mastermind, whoever he is. You can count on me. Like always. Sunny studied her for a bit. Just like that. Before he knew it, a relieved sigh escaped from his lips. Good. That's good. This is great news, actually. Thank you. He paused for a few moments, and then asked. But may I ask why? Saint remained silent for a long while, contemplating. It seemed like she was carefully choosing the right words. But in the end, she simply smiled. I don't know. I must have gone mad. Sunny stared at her, dumbstruck. Seeing Saint smile was truly a breathtaking sight. 2,530 full experience. Finally, they gathered around the altar. Sunny, Effie, Morgan, Saint, and the other Mordred, who had woken up from his peaceful nap. The four of them glanced somber and apprehensive, while the CEO of the Valor Group looked carefree and full of curiosity. Good morning, Detective Sunless. How was your night? Sunny stared at him for a few seconds, then sighed. Eventful. He looked at each of his companions in turn, and then spoke calmly. As I already mentioned, the culprit behind the nihilist killings and the attempts on our lives is none other than the chairman of the Valor Group board, Matic. He perpetrated these crimes in an attempt to cover up his poor handling of the Northern Dam renovation project. Saying this, Sunny looked at the other Mordred. Just as Morgan had said, he did not look particularly hurt by the fact that his own uncle was trying to kill him. Mordred's expression remained relaxed and unblemished, and the slight smile playing on his lips did not falter. He did look a little concerned, though. Northern Dam renovation, that is just bad business. Terrible optics, as well. I simply do not understand what Uncle was thinking. Of all the things, Morgan had mentioned that the guy was harmless, but she had not mentioned that he was hopeless. At least he's honest. Shaking his head, Sunny continued. I struck a deal with Mordred, the mean Mordred, to pose as the Valor CEO and draw Matic out. They agreed to meet face to face and talk. Matic chose the location, it is the castle. So, that is where we need to go. Morgan raised an eyebrow. It is bound to be a trap, a death trap. You know that the other playing the role of our uncle will bring an army of henchmen to make sure that Mordred does not walk out of their meeting alive. Sunny smiled. Naturally, it's going to be a real mess, I'm counting on it. Turning away, he headed to the doors. Follow me. They exited the abandoned church and approached the PTV he had arrived on. While Sunny was trying to remember how to open a trunk, Effie blinked a couple of times. Wait, where did you get a car? And this one is much better than yours was, too. Sunny scowled, offended on behalf of his destroyed PTV. First of all, it's not better. It just looks nicer. And second of all, I paid a visit to our friends from the Black Snake Gang after finishing up with Mordred and had a good talk with them. He smiled. Let's just say those gangsters felt inclined to give me some protection money. And that money came in the form of this vehicle, as well as what's in its trunk. The trunk finally opened, and Sunny pointed inside with a proud look. Effie whistled. Wow, inside were all the tools one would need to storm the lair of a criminal mastermind. Tactical gear, bulletproof vests, boxes of bullets, guns. Effie looked at them with a confused expression. Where did they even get all this stuff? Handing her a bulletproof vest, Sunny pointed to the letters on its front. Where else? They bought it from the cops. It was a funny situation, really. The criminals had purchased illegal equipment from dirty cops, and then he extorted them for said equipment, receiving it as a bribe to leave them alone. It was like a cycle of corruption. In any case, the castle will most likely be heavily defended. We will sneak inside. If that doesn't work, we will storm it, take out Maddox's henchmen, and then deal with Maddox himself. Once he is rendered useless, the Castellan will be forced to reveal its hand. That is when we will help Effie reach it, destroy it, and reclaim her authority as the master of the castle. Morgan frowned. Hold your horses. How are we supposed to take out a small army of private security specialists? They will be armed, as well, and we are currently mundane. One bullet will be all it takes to kill us. Sunny smiled. Maddox might have an army of henchmen, but we have Saint. He pointed to his taciturn psychiatrist, who was looking at the firearms with an uninterested expression. As far as we know, she is the only being in Mirage City capable of wielding awakened powers. She is far away from reclaiming her transcendent might, but even then, one of her should be enough to balance the scales. Saint gave him a sideways look and did not say anything. Morgan, meanwhile, looked at the other Mordred. What about him? Where are we going to stash him? Sunny shook his head. Nowhere in Mirage City is safe. Not only because the Castellan is now hunting him down in an attempt to make your fratricide fantasy come true, but also because the northern dam is compromised. There is no telling when it will collapse, and what the result will be. He offered the other Mordred a dark smile. So, we'll be taking him with us. Naturally, Mr. Mordred here is not exactly a seasoned fighter. Sunny turned to Morgan. So, it is going to be your job to keep him safe. She blinked a couple of times. Mine, why me? Have you forgotten why I? She did not say the rest, but he understood. Morgan had come to the Palace of Imagination to kill the other Mordred, so she was understandably surprised that Sunny was entrusting her brother's safety to her. But it was the very fact that she seemed reluctant to admit her goal in front of the other Mordred that affirmed his decision. He shrugged. Because his survival is paramount, and after Saint, you are the strongest among us due to your flaw. Plus, you are his sister. He'll be more comfortable with you, and less likely to do something foolish. Morgan looked at him in displeasure for a while, then scoffed and looked away. Don't regret your decision later, Lord Shadow. Sunny looked at her and grinned. Hey, don't pout. Isn't it fun? The last time, you were defending the castle from Mordred, now, you'll be the one besieging it with him. It's like the full experience. Morgan pierced him with a scathing gaze. Do not pout. Her voice sounded cold enough to freeze the falling rain. Sunny Clee read his throat. Well, in any case, arm yourselves and get into the PTV. He looked up and inhaled the alien air of Mirage City with a full chest. What would the devil detective say? Sunny smiled darkly. It is time to dish out some justice.